historian. He's a popular historian. And I'm reading a book right now. It's a collection of essays and speeches. It's called The American Spirit. And in one of those, he talks about the value of history. And he talks about we're guilty of making history painful as a subject. And he says, at the end of the day, history is stories. History is stories. And the kudos I give to ACSC over the years is GOE is about bringing a bunch of old folks in and letting us tell stories. Now here's my pitch to you. You've got your stories. There are people in this room that have done incredible things in combat. Don't hide your stories. Don't sit on your stories. Find venues and places. Is it in the club? Is it in the lounge? Keep it informal. Keep it relaxed. Keep it laid back. But share the stories. What has happened when we deployed out of Myrtle Beach, and I did not deploy, our youngest wingman was Rob Sweetness. Sweetness had had his mission-ready check ride the week before. Mission-ready 1 week before we got in the jets. And so Rick Schatzel, he's looking at the lineup, and Ron Kurtz are looking at the deployment lineup, and they say, mission-ready pilot, number 4, Rob Sweet. And his flight commander sees the list, and he goes running into the school, and the commander said, boss, are you sure you want Sweetness in the lineup? He says, you recommended him to be mission-ready, and I signed off on the Form 8. Is he ready or not? He says, he's got an unaccomplished task. What's that? He's never done night refueling. Well, he's about to do 4 of them on the way to Morone, Spain. Put him on Steve Phyllis's wing, who was the senior IP in the squadron and the weapons officer at the time, and SIF will get him across. So think about this as commanders and leaders. When you look at the young pup, person that looks like they're wet behind the ears, and it comes time to make the decision, are they combat mission ready or they're not? Are they ready to go or they're not? Are they ready to deploy or they're not? Make the call. If they're ready, then let them go. Well, you're ready, but maybe not this deployment. Well, yeah, I know you're mission ready, but we really want to put a more experienced guy on it. I knew of wings that stacked the deck. I knew of wings that the lead squadron flew with the entire Stanavelle shop, the entire weapons shop, and all the IPs from both squadrons. I'm forever thankful to Sandy Sharp that says, are they mission ready? Stick their butts in the airplane and get it going. Think about that as you're a leader, and you're thinking about those that are mission ready and not. We have come so far with our training. This was always our fear in Kandahar. We would go out and we do armed overwatch. And at some point, things may get warm, and you need to stay there. You need your presence. They want to see A-10s, they want to hear A-10s. But you got to go to the tanker. And we do yo-yo ops. Standard. It's a standard Afghan thing, probably Iraq as well. One guy stays, the other goes to the tanker. Gets off the tanker, comes back, the other guys. And so you just yo-yo to the tanker. On this particular one, the problem was the wingman, his first ever flight in a United States Air Force airplane without an IP. Combat mission check ride, comes over, he's on his orientation flight, and there's a tick. And they're doing yo-yo ops. Okay. This youngster drops both of his LGBs, drops his JDAM, shoots 750 rounds out of the gun, troops in contact, danger close, and the flight leads on the tanker. We didn't have the heart to tell him that's probably the best sortie he'll ever fly in his life. But myself and Trashman Hicks, who's the OG, and the squadron commander, and then the vice wing commander, who's, we all look at each other and say, that's the RTU. That's what they get in the RTU, because every one of those RTU instructors is a combat veteran, and they know the standards that we train to. Our Air Force is highly stressed. As General Horner said, we were on the crest of the readiness wave. We had 95% MC rates on the hogs. In those days, you would come out of the 3-day surge and the jets were flying better than they did on the first day. We had new equipment. Everything was awesome. The readiness was magnificent. But I will tell you this. You are better trained than we were. you are better prepared than we were because you've been there, done that. And tell the stories to each other and don't let them slip away. Okay, I'm going to hush. I'm going to stop, and then we'll throw it open to Q&A. Okay, and I'm going to let the exec back on stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we'll open up for questions. If you have a question, please make your way over to the microphones located on the side of the walls.
Hey, sir, I'm Major Abranovich. I'm a Jolly pilot. I just had a question in regard to CSAR. As you know, we're replacing our aging HH-60s with more HH-60s. And we're looking kind of...
Aging, overweight, overgrossed HH-60s with
all
new
above, sir. Yep.
Overweight, overgrossed HH-60s. I'm on it. I'm
Roger
on
that. When we're looking forward against a threat, more of a near peer-to-peer threat, looking maybe China or Russia, and we're going to plan to bring our guys home in a contested A280 environment like that, what do you see as the best path forward for combat rescue?
I think we, first of all, don't throw away what we've done. Secondly, let's not be afraid to look at the approach that AFSOC had for years. This is an emergency covert exfil. The idea that I'm going to come in the dead of the night, nobody knows I'm there, and I'm going to go to the known location, pick the guy up and come back out. But again, you're looking at bookend approaches, and neither one is going to exclusively be the answer. In the A280 construct, you bring up the challenge we always had in teaching CSAR academics. We talked about low threat SAR and high threat SAR. What's the threat? Low threat, high threat, medium threat. Depends on which member you're talking to. What might be low threat for me might be medium threat for you, might be high threat for the survivor. Or what's low threat for the survivor might be unsurvivable for you and for me. And so I think we're going to have to go back to some things we thought about in the European context. Aviators are going to know how to do E&E because nobody's coming for 3 or 4 days. Nobody can survive it to get there for 3 or 4 days. If it's an F-22 that got shot down, well, who else can get there? And so I think we're going to need to back up and take a holistic approach about what is survivable, what is expected, what is required, and what is doable. Also need to go back, as General Horner said, the doctrinal issues of whose game is it. If it's a sailor off the boat, then the Navy owns it unless they can't do it. If it's the soft guys, they own it unless they can't. So we need to be careful. And we got into this in ACC where we thought, we do CSAR for everybody. Not so fast. It's a service responsibility until they cannot. But I think we're going to have to recognize the limitations there will be on CSAR in certain places. And on the other hand, the risks that we'll be willing to accept to execute a CSAR. Remember the 117 in Bosnia? Who was the rescue vehicle? It was an A-10. The A-10 sitting inside the SA-3 threat ring that shot down the F-117. I've known A-1 guys sitting in a hammerhead getting ready to launch a 4-ship of A-1s, and they're getting a call, we've had an F-4 shot down a Root Pack 6. And they're thinking, and they want me to go there? There will come a time, and General Short has talked about this, who is the Allied Force Commander. There will come a time when it takes the JFAC to make the call of, we can't do it, the threat is too high. Or he's going to say, he or she's going to say, I've got to do it. I've got to accept the risk of trying to go get somebody and tell them we're serious. And then I think we're going to have to think, as I've discussed, the spectrum of CSAR concepts. Is it going to be, I'm going to sneak under the farmer's fence, raid his hen house, and nobody's going to know, or I'm going to go crashing in the front door and dare anybody to get within 5 miles of me? I don't know the right answer. You're going to get to figure it out. And what we will have to do is, and again, the A-10s, looks like the A-10s are staying around. That's great. We've got to get comfortable with working with something other than the traditional rescue aircraft, that being the A-10. What role can other airplanes fill in this? Met a guy, Arnie Clark. I flew the first A-10 CSAR ever, 8.8 hours, receiving Air Force Cross. Arnie Clark member of the same fighter wing, 354th Fighter Wing, flew the first A-7 CSAR in Southeast Asia, 8.8 hours, received an Air Force Cross. And we talked about tactics differences, tactics. And I learned the most important thing I asked, what's your loadout at Sandy 1? Did you have CBU? Did you have GP bombs? What kind? Did you have API? What kind? He said, I had a full gun and I had 4 pods of rockets and 3 tanks of gas. I thought, huh? He said, Sandy 1 is command and control. So break down the roles, and then you figure out who does what and how they do it. Sandy 1 is command and control. Sandy 2 is fact guard. Sandy 3 and 4, some of those roles are timeless, some of those roles have to change. But this is going to get really tough in some places in an A280 environment. And at the end of the day, the JFAC is going to make the call, yay or nay. And it may be go, even when it doesn't look like the best option to go. We may have no choice. Don't know if that helps. Go figure it out. Who else?
So I have a question. Having commanded the 451st Air Expeditionary Wing in Kandahar in 2010-2011, what were some of the similarities and differences that you saw from Desert Storm, and what were some of the lessons learned that you were able to apply?
Differences? We had a reserve unit show up because there were political pressure at home for them to show up. And I questioned whether or not they were ready to show up. I never asked that question in Kandahar. Never. If I could tell the difference in an airman on the flight line between reserve component and active duty component, something was wrong. At the front end, at the pointy end, it is transparent. It is absolutely transparent. The capabilities, the skills, the professionalism between the reserve component and the active. So that's a huge difference in my mind from what we saw in Desert Storm. The ability to do rotations, I was just astounded. At Kandahar and at Bagram, I would watch the Army take a month to do a RIP-TOA. And again, you're talking about a division, so you're talking about 15,000 soldiers or more, and you're talking about a different beast and a different animal. But I would watch an AEF rotation, and it's a 24-hour thing. An airman for the LRS walks off the C-17, high fives the other LRS airman who's walking on the C-17, and we're done. Or people walk into a work center at POL that have never seen each other before and say, well, I'm from Mountain Home. Yeah, I'm from Beale. Yeah, I'm from Eglin. They've never worked before and said, well, I'm the senior master sergeant, so I guess I'm the OIC, NCOIC. Done. We have the team. The team is built. We go to work, and we don't bat an eye. We would do A-10 swap outs, and A-10 swap outs at Kandahar were dicey because we didn't have the ramp space. So we would have 4 A-10s coming up the boulevard to cover a TOT, and 4 A-10s departing down the boulevard to go back to the deed. And then they come off the TOT and they come land. So it was very much a ballet dance. We never reduced the number of lines we would fly. And so the ability to do rotations consistently without a drop in mission effectiveness, I just thought was enormously impressive. Now, on the flip side, I remember General Schwarzkopf and General Horn saying, there be no rotation. We're here till this is done. And although that was a downer for morale, once everybody got past it, it meant, hey, we're here till this gets fixed. And that had a great effect on people. It had a great effect on people. Okay, then let's get on with it. Let's get it done. And there was none of this, I'm approaching the end of my tour, so I mentally start checking out. So I mentally take my eye off the ball because I'm 2 days away or 2 weeks away or 2 sorties away. There's none of that. We're here till we're done. To me, that was a big difference. And I don't know the right answer, but as a commander, you got to watch that. You've got to watch people taking their eye off the ball as they get to the end of a rotation and they just want to get home. And you got to keep everybody sprinting to the finish line. That's a leadership challenge, but I think we do well at it.
Good afternoon, General. Thank you for sharing your stories with us today. I'm Major Newcomer, Flight 18. I had a question. Out of all the Eagles, 7 are pilots. The other one's a gunner, an observer. A lot of ops folks on the Eagles today. I'm an airfield operations guy, ops support. There's a lot of mission support, medical, maintenance, other folks in the room. I was wondering, based on your experience in Desert Storm, what was the biggest contribution that the non-operators provided to you being successful in your mission?
When I came back from my first sortie, we landed at a FOL, King Khalid Military City, and it was just gas, bullets, bombs, and you take off and you go fly again. We landed the first day, and it was just a beehive of activity. And as I cleared the runway and I started taxiing down the taxiway, and you had, we call them ICTs, Integrated Combat Turns. You pull in, you never shut down, you get your bombs, you pull out, you go get gas, you never shut down, and then you just go again. It was awesome. And as you're taxiing down the taxiway, we see these weapons load crews with pieces of cardboard and magic markers as cheap bombs here, never used before, get them here. They wanted you to pull into their spot. They wanted you to get their bombs before you went back into the fight. When my airplane got shot up, the crew chief was Sergeant Willie Wilson. He was up at the FOL. The assistant crew chief was Sergeant Eric Staniland. Sergeant Staniland told me later, I asked him, first of all, that was my airplane, by the way, that got shot. And so talked about being in trouble with the crew chief. That was me. I asked him how he felt about that. He said, when he went to get the airplane, what was he thinking? He said, I felt like I was going to the morgue to identify a member of my family. And he said that with a straight face. We almost pushed her off in the ditch, but they decided, there was a battle damage repair team out of Sacramento, and said, let us do an experiment here, and they replaced the wing on the airplane. Airplane's in 3 sections. They had to replace the center section and the right section. It took them 30 days to replace the wing on the airplane. What happens to an airplane when it sits for 30 days? Canbird. If it wasn't welded to the airplane, it was yanked off to be a spare part for some other airplane. Well, as the engineers are rebuilding the airplane, everything's getting pulled off. UHF, TACAN, oil pressure gauges, throttle grip, everything's getting yanked off the airplane. Well, it's not the battle damage repair guy's responsibility to do that. It's a crew chief's job to fix that and get all that back on. Well, they repaired the airplane, but now Eric Staniland has to put the airplane back together with all of those cannibalized parts. And the war is over now. War's done. We're waiting on tankers to get out of Dodge. And one night, Colonel Ruprecht, who was the deputy commander for maintenance, an old F-4 Southeast Asia backseater, he comes walking through the hangar, and he looks up, and in the clamshell is my A-10, and what he sees is 2 feet and 2 legs sticking out of the cockpit. Eric Staniland is up there upside down in the cockpit putting some part back on. He says, Sergeant Staniland, are you ready to go home yet? I said, not until my airplane goes home. All airmen need is a sense of possession about their job, whatever their job is. They need a sense that their job is important and that it's theirs, and then we get out of their way. And if those of us wearing the bags ever are so thoughtless as to demean the airmen that don't wear bags, I hope they keep packing your chute right. We put our lives in their hands every day. Another mission I flew, this one was was Kandahar, doing armed overwatch. A small convoy getting ready to do a village visit is on the banks of the Helmand River up in the foothills of the mountains. They stop. The village is deathly quiet. The captain steps out of his MRAP, wants a better look because you can't see out of those things. And he steps around to the front of the vehicle and takes about 3 steps and steps on an IED. I'm talking to the ground fact, the ALO, who's sitting in the convoy, he's actually in the lead vehicle. And all we know is the ALO says, gotta go, and he's off the mic. And so now we got nobody to talk to. We didn't know what had happened. The ALO gets out of the truck and does self-aid buddy care on the captain. Slaps the tourniquet on the leg, probably saves his life. Then we start the golden hour. And now we're calling the CASEVAC UH-60 out of Tarankalp. He's there in about 20 minutes, picks up the captain, captain's back in Tarancal in about 20 minutes, so he's in the hands of a field surgeon within 40 minutes. He's messed up. So they bring one of our HC-130s out of Bastion, again, AC-130s out of Davis-Monthan, comes in Tarancal with a CCAT team on board, nurses, medical professionals, PJs, load him up and get him down to the Roll 3 hospital at Kandahar. Gets down to the Roll 3 hospital. I will tell you, if I had been hurt or injured in Afghanistan and I had a choice between being teleported to Johns Hopkins or the Roll 3 hospital in Kandahar, I'd go to the Roll 3 hospital in Kandahar. If there was a surgical specialist, they had it. Canadian, Australian, Brit, U.S., didn't matter. They were side by side. After I finished flying that sortie, I went back and I landed and did my paperwork, drove over to the Roll 3. I wanted to go see the soldier. And I slipped in the back door, and I walk in, and usually if you went in the front door, you had to check your weapon, you had to clear your weapon and put it in the vault and get a receipt and all of that. I just slipped in the back door. So the Air Force one-star walks in a flight suit, and he's still toting his weapon, and everybody kind of looks, and they suddenly start asking me if they can help. And I said, I'd like to see the captain that came in, stepped on an IED, come over, and he's in recovery. And I step over, and I'm clustered around by about 3 nurses and about 4 doctors, and they're telling me everything that I had to do to the kid. And he's unconscious. He's out. And he will be out all the way back to the States. They were going to keep him under, and he was going to fly out in 24 hours. And they were talking about how thrilled they were. He says, this guy was in great shape. He's strong as an ox. He came through surgery great. We think we've got the infection under control. This kid's going to walk again. He's going to be great. And I'm sitting here thinking, in my mind is screaming, but he's missing a leg. It wasn't the doctor's perspective. And the doctor actually kind of caught my body language, and he says, oh, don't worry about the leg. This kid's going to walk again. This kid's probably going to run again. And I did. I saw a picture of him a few years later, and he was indeed doing quite well and may have actually stayed on active duty. The point was, it took a lot of support people to make that happen. And I'm just so leery of dividing the Air Force into the operational crowd and the support crowd. I think it's a false designation. For 31 years, I flew close air support. I was a support guy. I think the ops and support moniker offers a false distinction that is unhelpful. You want airmen to own their you want them to own their mission, you want them to own their job and feel good about what they're doing, and then get out of their way and let them go. Okay.
Good, sir. We have time for one more question.
Yes.
Sir, Shelby Summer, Flight 15. You talked about knowing when to give your people a leash and when to let them off it. One of the themes of this year for us has been bold leadership. I was wondering if you had any views or recommendations on how we can make sure that we encourage bold leadership in an organization that seems to be growing more risk averse.
Show examples of it. The hardest thing to do with any organization is to change its culture. That is the most difficult thing to do. And when leadership has a 2-year tour, it's really hard to change culture. Jack Welch could change GE's culture when he was the CEO for 30 years. CE arguably became Jack Welch and mirrored Jack Welch. Typically, command tours don't last that long. And so, in my mind, culture change in many ways will be top to bottom and bottom to top. And people will have to see some examples of bold leadership. Hopefully bold leadership won't get schwacked and won't get their nose swatted because they try bold leadership. But at the same time, you've got to let people try bold leadership. To me, this is what's harder. You've got to let people try things differently. Yeah, I want you to be bold leaders, but it'll be harder when somebody comes to you and say, hey, I got a really bold idea. Can I run with this? That's when you'll get tight-jawed. And are you willing to let them go? Here's my plea to you. have fun watching them. Not everybody will get it right. Some of them are going to stub their toe. But if you can envision yourself as the one that shows people the end zone, show them the goalpost, show them the sidelines, give them the left and right limits, give them the parameters, and then just get out of their way. And that's when command really gets fun, is to watch them go. And I don't mean your captains, I mean your senior airmen. As a wing commander, I talk to a lot of groups. I talk to FTAC, brand new one-stripers walking in the door. They're afraid to open their mouth. All the way up to chief master sergeants, the professional cynics in the wing. First sergeants, everybody. My favorite group to talk to was the ALS class. Senior airmen getting ready to pin on staff sergeant. They are bold, they are ready, they are knowledgeable, and they're fearless in asking their questions. And they are ready for an opportunity to lead. And so when we do an ALS graduation, here was my plea to the crowd. I said, tonight we've pinned stripes on them, and they are all staff sergeants. I expect them to act like NCOs. But here's the transaction. It's up to us to start treating them like NCOs and letting them be NCOs and conducting themselves as NCOs. We replicate ourselves as an Air Force better than anybody. We grow the next generation of NCOs, we grow the next generation of senior NCOs, we grow the next generation of lieutenants and captains, I think better than anybody. And if you're going to change the culture that we've got, however you want to identify it, you're going to have to do it incrementally. You don't change culture on a dime. Typically, you're going to look back over your shoulder in a few years and realize that's when I think it started to turn. You're going to see it in your rearview mirror. Be bold, but more importantly, let people working for you be bold. Okay, I'm
Great,
over
sir.
time.
General Johnson, we want to thank you for being with us today and sharing your experiences and leadership insights.
Thank you.